I had a great time watching the portrait. I loved that it
Thank
wasn't
you.
a typical horror movie, which I think is why it stood out to me. So was that what drew you to both this project and just going into the horror genre as a whole?
Well, firstly, thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Um, I think what drew me to the project mainly was the for me the running vein in the project, the artery of it was mostly about grief. And it was 2021, the world was going through COVID. We had just gotten out of being in lockdown. A lot of people had passed away, people we knew. I lost three beings I really loved, not to COVID, but in that year. So I just felt like I was swimming in a pool of grief in a lot of ways, and I was dealing with grief like I had never dealt with it before. And when I read that film, I was interested in the fact that it was a horror film, but that mainly it was psychological thriller with a lot of suspense to it. And interestingly enough, when I read it, I thought, oh my God, I've been feeling like um my grief has felt suspenseful. Like there's a suspense feeling to grief. You walk in the door and you call the person's name that you've lost. You forget that they're gone, and there's this there's this almost empty space between you calling them and them never answering. Or I had lost my 16-year-old dog, and so I remember whistling one day, forgetting that she wouldn't come, and just this wave struck me of realization that I would never hear her footsteps again as I made her particular whistle. So it felt very thriller like to just always be in this limbo of the now and the never. And when I read the script, it reminded me of that. It reminded me of that state of grief where everything becomes sort of suspended, and suspense is suspension. So I was very interested in studying that sort of in between your reality and whatever we believe is where those people are, or those beings are. And the fact that Alex is not dead made it even more interesting to me, because it's a death in life. He's not really gone, but he is. So how would you feel if there's a ease in death where you have no choice, you have to let go. But with someone like Alex, you can't. So you are constantly in that suspense and in that limbo.
Yeah, it is such a fascinating exploration of grief. And of course, that relationship between Sophia and Alex, obviously the heart of the movie. And we get some hints that maybe their relationship wasn't the happiest before the accident. But when it came to exploring that dynamic with Ryan and maybe thinking about the past, what did you both really enjoy delving into on that front to inform what you were doing in the present day as these characters?
We didn't have much time to really even get to know each other, but
Mm.
we did find a lot of kindredship. We have similar values. We both love the ocean. So I think in the first time we ever met, we just knew we just people stopped right behind me to chat. Sorry. We just knew that there was a connection between him and I, and we just really held tight to that, to knowing that we hold extremely similar values. And then we actually played our characters as if they were in an incredibly loving relationship. A movie's made more than once. It's made at least three times, in the writing, in the shooting, and in the editing. And in the writing, there wasn't that story that you see now in the edited version, where it looks like they had a tough relationship. We had a scene that was much more love driven. Um, but it helped afterwards when I saw the edited version, and it seemed like they had a problematic relationship where he might have been even aggressive toward her in the past. I think it fed correctly into the present time.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Ryan is at times he's very mysterious and silent, but then we see that explosive side of Alex as well. So to have a scene partner like that, what was that like for you? Obviously, you know what's coming from the script, but I'm guessing there's a lot of freedom to play on set with that dynamic as well.
I loved that he loved it and I loved it too, because I used to be a dancer, and I love expressing without words. I think words, language get in the way a lot. I mean, if we think about meeting people that don't speak our language, we find our way. Humans always find a way to express themselves. So having a character that doesn't speak, and for me to have to read my scene partner only through their eyes or their physicality was a beautiful exploration, specifically because it brought me back to being a dancer, where you don't talk to your partner when you're dancing with them. You just have to follow them. You just have to instinctually know where they're going and what they're going to do. And it made it really just a relationship of confidence and of trust. Mostly, we really trusted each other. And it also brought about, I think, a sweetness for Sophia to know that, you know, when you're with someone that can't really communicate to you what they're feeling, you learn to read them differently. So it was definitely a wonderful challenge to explore the craft in that way, to work with someone who you can't practice lines with. There's no rehearsing. It's just being in the moment and allowing whatever he does to sort of move you wherever it needs to move you.
Yeah, for sure. And, you do have to carry a lot of this film by yourself, of course, particularly as that sense of menace continues to build and surround Sophia. And, we see her start to question what's happening to her and almost question her reality in many ways. So what was it like for you to tap into that increased level of fear as the film progresses? And was that quite harrowing for you to take home at the end of the day?
I think the more harrowing thing, well, in practicality, was that we shot the film in 18 to 20 days, and I had to keep, and it was completely shot in disorder. So I had to keep a lot of my emotional congruence, very focused, very observant of what I did, so I could remember, if I'm coming out of this scene, what did I do in the scene before? If I'm going to shoot it later, it has to connect. It has to have a thread of emotional connection. But the fear factor, it's interesting. I was always terrified of horror films when I was younger, petrified. I didn't start watching them really until I finished my acting conservatory college, and thought I need to get into watching those kinds of films because someday maybe I'll get to do one. And so I treated it more as a psychological thing than a horror film, than wanting to project that my characters petrified, because I don't think as a human being we get really petrified until the moment of you're gonna die presents itself in front of us, or survival is in our hands, right? We're more curious as humans. We're actually, curiosity kill the cat. We're actually so curious sometimes that we take steps that maybe if we thought of them logically sitting back, we would never do that. But I did most of those moments. As you can see, when she approaches the painting, she's still willing to touch it, and then it comes at her. She's still curious. There's fear, but there's more curiosity and disbelief. So I never really wanted to play into the fear until she stops recognizing Alex, and until those final moments where she really, now, 1 second. My husband knows I'm in an interview, and he still decided to call me on my phone. So it wasn't until those moments that I really, went into, all right, now we got to play survival.
Yeah, absolutely. And, obviously we've talked about Alex, and that is at the core of the film. But then at the same time, Sophia finds herself surrounded by people like Mags and Brooks, who outwardly they seem very nice. But then there's that sinister undertone, like when Brooks has that line about not letting a dog suffer in the way Alex does. So what did you really enjoy about exploring those relationships? Because obviously a little bit less explicitly tense than what happens with Alex, but still there's so much to delve into there.
Yeah. Well, I love that they were, like you said, sort of these dual characters, that there was this sweetness and this, we want to help you, but there was also this sort of weirdness about them, specifically with Mags. And then the scene with Brooks is so weird. When I read that scene in the script, I was like, I don't know how we make this scene real. Like, why would Sophia even permit this? But it was interesting in the more reading of the script and the exploration of her grief, you start to lose your mind, and that is the scene that sort of showcases her in a light that is almost not her, willing to kiss another man, needing love from another person, acceptance, dependency from someone else, being tired of being dependent only on yourself. So it was really interesting to kind of explore those things in the moment, because again, we didn't get to rehearse. I didn't get to meet Virginia or Mark Paul until the day of shooting, and I didn't know what they were going to bring, how they were going to attack their characters. But ultimately, I think that's the beauty of our craft, when actors are in the moment and they're professional and they really want to give their best. You find these idiosyncrasies of the scene that you hadn't ever thought of, and Mark Paul brought a lot of new ones to that scene that I didn't read into, that really allowed me to even, like, my laughter after I tried to kiss him and the way he reacted. I didn't plan on having that embarrassing laughter of I just got rejected. And the way he did it brought about new things for me. So this film was really an exploration of the moment, because we didn't have the money or the time to do anything else, to really manipulate the moments.
Yeah, and of course, like you said, it was quite a quick turnaround on the movie, but it was also Simon Ross's debut feature. So when it came to
Yes.
working with him and achieving what he was looking for from this movie, and obviously specifically what he was looking for from you, what did you enjoy about that actor-director relationship as this project's lead?
Oh, I loved working with Simon. I I've always been an avid reader. I'm a bit of a nerd as a person, in terms of that curiosity of just wanting to just absorb as much knowledge as I can, or whatever we call knowledge, book knowledge, past knowledge. He's Simon is a really profound intellectual. Like, he's read most books I've ever read. He's listened to all the music I've listened to. So we really found a kindership there, where we would tell each he's a cinephile, and we would tell each other, I love this, I love that, I love this actress, I love this book. I told him about, read John Didion on The Year of Magical Thinking, which is a book that really helped me to explore grief. So we really were able to bounce back and forth for a couple of weeks before starting the project, on Zoom, because he was in Britain, and just bounce around our tone and ideas. And we found that we worked well together. I love a leader on set, but I hate an arrogant leader, and directors get sometimes so overwhelmed that they can get a little rough and tough. And Simon is just the loveliest, warmest. He really knows how to focus on what is important to focus. There are no tantrums thrown on set, which is so common, but mostly he works with you before, so he can really let you fly in the moment. And I'm so grateful for that, because of course there were moments where he asked me, hey, can you try this or that, but mostly it was I trusted him and he trusted me, and that is everything. You can't really shoot films, you can't really tell stories if you don't trust your partners, whether it be wardrobe or makeup or whatever. And he chose, and that's another thing, he chose majestic people for this project. People that might not have a lot of credits, like me, that are people that have stayed true to the craft and the art, that haven't really sold their soul to celebritism or whatever, or the money machine of our industry, and really just love the craft for what it is. And that made us all really trust each other and know that you know what you're doing, and I'm going to let you do it. And I think it's what made this film turn out to be something that a lot of us might have not expected, because again, we had such little time and money, resources.
Well, I thought it came together perfectly. And Natalia, while I have you, I hope you don't mind. I was a big fan of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So I was just wondering, were you satisfied with how that journey ended? And would you like to get that gang back together in the MCU now they're delving into multiverses and bringing in the TV shows like Daredevil? Would you like to go back, do you think?
I'm completely satisfied. Yo-Yo is, I choke up every time I talk about Yo-Yo. She is profoundly special to me as a person and as an artist. I got the perfect role at the perfect time with her. She built me up. And then, being part of such a huge franchise like Marvel, and my grandfather was a huge comic book fan. So in all ways, it was really magical. But to be honest with you, it was the beginning of my career in the United States. It was perfect for that moment. But I really want to focus on the kind of stuff that Portrait is. I want to do a lot of indies. I want to do stuff that really does craft work. I didn't become an actress to be famous or make money. And I feel like sometimes those big franchise movies just turn into that. They can really lock you up as an actor on just those types of characters. I think I had 5 years of doing a superhero. That's enough for me. Someone else can take it over now. And but I'm profoundly grateful. I think it was perfect for me. It was like that relationship that you finish off just beautifully, and it's everything it could have ever been.
Yeah, well, I completely respect that. And it was a wonderful character and a wonderful performance. And like you said, The Portrait is a great movie. And just one final question for you. At the end of the movie, there is a bit of a sequel hook potentially. So do you see yourself potentially coming back to continue Sophia's story, or are you interested in maybe exploring other areas of this horror genre, whether it be a fun slasher like Scream, or maybe even something a little bit darker, like you said, an indie project you can really get down into these deeper themes like grief?
I mean, look, if Ari Aster calls, I'm in. Like, who doesn't want to do any of his movies? He's a brilliant director. I'm not a huge fan of torture porn. I probably would not do the stuff that is extremely like torturous. I have a very hard time putting that out in the world, but who knows? In terms of a sequel for Portrait, I hope that for Portrait. I don't think I would be part of it. I think it needs to be a new story. I think the Portrait needs to find a new home and a new woman to torture. But I will always be there to support. If it turns out to be Simon who does a sequel, whoever, I will always be there. But most like Virginia, a lot like Virginia, she did Candyman, and then you got to let it go and go on to horizons, new characters, new explorations.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Natalia, I had a great time watching this movie. I can't recommend it enough, because what a journey it must have been for you as a performer, and just a journey as an audience member. I loved it. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
Oh, likewise. Thank you, Justin. Thank you for watching and for loving it. Thank you very much.
Great to meet you. Thanks again, Natalia.
You too.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. You too. Merry Christmas and happy holidays.